Hi, I'm Tom from Just One Pack, and this is AC on the Short Alpha Clash podcast, where I'll talk all things Alpha Clash on my way to work. We are now in the midst of spoiler season, so you have to dig into that. Now, Echoes of Eternity, the next whole set coming out, in just a week or so, we will have Spoilers of the Forgotten, and then we started doing the spoilers for Echoes of Eternity, right? And as they pointed out in their podcast last time, they really wanted to wait with doing spoilers, so letting Seas of the Forgotten stand on its own, having its time in the limelight. But now we have to start looking at it to get the timing right to get things out. I'm guessing there was a delay of Seas of the Forgotten due to the whole international trade things. Right? So we're on now. We are getting Echoes of Eternity, which is the exciting in so many ways, being the first set in the Cosmic Block, having a completely different theme, and also introducing us to characters we barely know. Right? Oh no! Up till now, the contenders we have met have been from the comic book, from the novel. Now we don't have that story about them. We do have, for those lucky enough to have the board game, which will be out in just a bit too. There's a lot happening from the last half year here. We sort of have a small introductory text on telling us a little bit about the characters. So we could go there. However, the vast majority have read nothing about these characters, and that while that is about to change or will change, they are still fairly unknown, right? Anyway, the interesting bit here is that there are. So let me do it this way. When they do spoilers for Echoes of Eternity, we already know some of what is coming, but we don't know what that means. I'm thinking about, if nothing else, the role system. Now, the role system in the board game is how you set up a team. You need one savior, one destroyer, and one sentinel, and their powers lean into that sort of playstyle. Now, whether that is not whether how that is translated into the card game is now the big question. We know roles will be there. We know how to see what role a contender at least is located, right? We've known that for ages, since there was the first contender was revealed back in, I don't remember when, where we also were told that there would be dragons in the next set, where both Fangwin and Ansudak, that at least how I pronounce it, that's the good thing about dragons, they don't come for you if you mispronounce their names. Where both those dragons will be in the set. We know that one of them will be a contender. So, well, we don't technically know that Ansudak will be a contender in this set. However, it would be really odd if it weren't. And we already know about it. That would be a stroke of genius, but also a very long planning horizon, right? Anywho, we know that with dragons, we know that the role symbol will be in the top right corner of the contenders. And now we're starting to see the role symbols show up on spoiled cards. sort of in the text, right? Um, but what that means, we do not know. Now, this could, for me, and I love speculating. This is one of my favorite parts about um, spoiler season, and Alpha Clash is doing it very good, a lot better than the Matic, right? Uh, where Matic would much more, at least for when I still was following along, would sort of present the new mechanic, and then we'll see some cards having it. Alpha Clash lets us speculate, lets us sort of dig into our own brains, thinking of and guessing on what that might mean. And roles are a very good example of this. We don't know what they mean. They can mean anything, and they can mean hardly anything at all. All we know is that they will be there, and they will be referenced in cards somehow. Now, as the spoiler season progresses, and as we get closer to getting closer to the release of Echoes of Eternity, I am certain that we will be much wiser about roles. But right now, we get to speculate. Right now, one of the things what they could be, at least for the first set, is simply a deck building constraint, right? A parameter more that we could put constraints on and that we could reserve for future use, leaving some design space for the card game. That could be things like, for deck building constraints, is the obvious one here, but also to leave a combo setup for later sets. Just like we do with colors, with affiliations, with locations, like if they're from Earth cards, for instance, and names and so on. So that could just be that. It is that, we sort of know that, but what effect that will have, we don't know yet. Now, that could just be the constraint, saying this card can only be played by a savior, this card can only be played by a sentinel, right? But to make that to have that give any kind of sense, they sort of have to put in a certain style in order for that to make any sense, and not just be a random blob, right? So just like Earth cards have a history where they're from, that is a thing. They, however, can be all sorts of things. The location is just a reference to the story. As far as I can tell, I haven't spotted a different play style with Earth cards that was not bound on a different feature, like which character was on it, more than the location they were from, right? For instance, I think both War and Lord Krong is from Badaga. No, is it Conquest? One of the contenders. One of the Harbingers, right? And they do not play the same, right? The same is Moxie and Magnate, both from Earth. They do not play the same. So the location is just a parameter, but it ties into the story of where they are. Now, roles, as we know they're called, could be just that. But in order for that to make sense, we need to lean into that in the stories coming up, and that might be the case, right? What I'm more inclined to think is that these will represent some sort of play style or mechanic that is unique to that character. sort of reserving some functionality to specific roles on the board, right, in the cards. That could, the obvious one is something like life gain could be limited to in future sets to saviors, for instance, where you could heal your contender or support your clash cards in some manner during a clash, for instance. That could be a savior move to do that, or have an effect where you need to have a savior on the board to have a positive effect on your life die. That could be a savior thing. Start building around mechanics around the rolls. I am inclined, as I said, to think that might be the case for the rolls. Just having them as a flag does not make a lot of sense to me. So that is the rolls, but as I said, we don't know what that means yet. And from what we've seen until now, we've seen 2 contenders. We don't know what Antidote does, but we've seen another contender, Iron Piston. We know what he does, and how we're supposed to use him. It's a really good question. But we do know those are there. For this is going to be off the top of my head. The big thing about Iron Piston is that you can take a card from your Oblivion, or the mechanics, the contender abilities. You can take a card from Oblivion, from the top of your Oblivion. That's another thing. From the top of your Oblivion, and put it in the bottom of your deck, I think. Right. That is his general contender ability. Now he has a second ability that lets him discard 10 cards, I think it is, from his Oblivion. Simply banish them. And to ready him again, right? And there's loads of speculation what that would mean, since that giving up 10 cards in your Oblivion, especially if you have features like he does, that allows you to use your Oblivion to get things back in some way. Just tossing out 10 cards to me seems really odd for the effect to ready your contender, right? I mean, if it was because he has the ability, it would be really, really cool to do twice, sure. But there is a lot of time involved in getting that right, that it's the second card you want back in your deck, stuff like that. So there must be something else about that. Now, of course, it's a mechanical discussion about what could that mean? What else could this tie into? Which is also really an interesting bit about spoiler season. You get to dream about components that might or might not be. Right? Anyway, we know that they are there, but we also seen tidbits of what else will come there. And we also know that as usual, I expect that they will continue making a contender for each color in every set, especially now that every box is a draft set, right? So they announced this a while back, and they reiterated in the last podcast through the portal that every box now is a draft set. So that we could expect there to be 5 contenders, and we only seen 2. There are hints of who else it could be, And if you want to know what contenders are possible, quote unquote, we need to look at the board game, I think, and we can find the contenders there. But that makes sense. That was not the point I was trying to make. It was just a loose tidbit. Or one of the new things that is in this, and we don't exactly know what it means yet, is the dragon affiliation. That is where I want to get to. So the dragon affiliation is a new affiliation. As always, introducing them now, a few sets in. Well, this is set 6, right? Introducing new affiliations sort of puts them at a disadvantage. Now, they already leaned a little bit into dragons with the Kagan, but it'd be really interesting to see if there is enough support for dragons. There might not be in constructed play, and this is one of the great benefits for doing drafts every set, is that depending on how the play style for the dragon will be, for the dragons, multiple, will be, there might not be enough support in the first sets to do a constructed format deck in any competitive viable form. But since this is draft, there's the distinct possibility that you could actually do a new, but they are doing it. Do a new affiliation, a new set. A new affiliation, new kind of character that needs a specific kind of support. Well, now you could build it in this set for the draft environment, which sort of gives you a lot of the filling cards, right? The commons you need in place to support your epics and your legendaries, right? You can have the common and uncommons, and even the beginning of the rares that you need to support that affiliation. You can have them now, make them viable in a limited environment, something like draft, and then later add more cards and let them grow into a constructed viable support, right? A constructed viable affiliation, so there would be enough cards for you to actually build around whatever strategy they are presenting. Now that is a good tool to have in your toolbox, I think. Now, having these two, a new affiliation and this role thing, we'll need to tie into the story. We need to present I hope, present a new way of, a new strategy to choose from. Exactly what that will be for dragons and for the different roles, I don't know. But really looking forward to getting to know that. So here's to the first week of spoiler seasons, and let's hope the second one will be just as good. I'll talk to you again soon. Bye.